Hello students, welcome to my class. So in this video, we will be discussing about another important topic that comes under unit 1 of your paper Bioinorganic Chemistry, that is nitrogen fixation. So what is nitrogen fixation? Why is it necessary? You know that nitrogen is present in abundance in the atmosphere, correct? And we all need nitrogen, be it plants, animals, everybody needs nitrogen. It is very essential for the growth and development, especially of the plants. Okay. But plants, they cannot directly take this nitrogen from atmosphere in the form of N2. If they have to utilize it, it should be converted to usable form, that is in the form of ammonia or nitrates. Okay, so even though it is available in abundance in the earth atmosphere, they cannot extract, plants cannot extract nitrogen directly from the atmosphere because they can utilize only its reduced form, that is ammonia or nitrate. Now somebody has to convert this atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia or nitrate. That work, that process of conversion of atmospheric nitrogen to usable form, that is ammonia or nitrate, is called as nitrogen fixation, which is done in different methods, be it natural or synthetic method. Natural method is called as biological nitrogen fixation, which is done by various bacteria that is present in the soil. They can convert atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia in the soil, and then it can be used by different plants, okay, or different life forms. Or it can also be done in industries or in laboratory, that is called as abiological nitrogen fixation. That is some of the synthetic methods like in vivo or in vitro nitrogen fixation. So in this unit, we will be studying about both natural as well as synthetic method of nitrogen fixation. How does it occur? So we will start with biological nitrogen fixation, which is a very important topic. More than at least 60% of nitrogen that is fixed to the soil is because of this process, that is biological nitrogen fixation. Now this is done by a specific group of prokaryotes. How do they do this? These are nothing but microorganisms. How are they doing this? How are they fixing nitrogen, or how are they converting nitrogen to ammonia in the soil? It is using an enzyme that is called as a nitrogenase enzyme, which is present in their body, which can convert nitrogen to ammonia and hence fix it to the soil. What happens afterwards? Using this enzyme, the microorganisms fix the nitrogen. Then this nitrogen, which is there in the form of ammonia, is absorbed by the plants, and then from ammonia in the plant body, it gets synthesized to different biomolecule, like further biomolecule, which will come to our body as well, because we consume plants, right? And even different animals, they consume plants, and that nitrogen hence moves to the body of different human and as well as animals. Correct? Are you understanding the process? And all this is happening because of this enzyme, that is nitrogenase, which is present in the body of these prokaryotes who are fixing the nitrogen. And this biological process is less efficient, and it occurs in room temperature and pressure. You do not have to supply special condition for this process to occur. Next, in this process, what are microorganisms doing? They transform atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia. That is nothing but nitrogen fixation, which is accessible to plants, correct? These microorganisms, how can they convert it? They need 16 moles of adenosine triphosphate, which is nothing but energy, for the reduction of 1 mole of nitrogen to give you ammonia. And where do they get the 16 moles of adenosine triphosphate? They get this energy from oxidation of organic molecule. So they can convert nitrogen to ammonia, but for that they need energy. That is 16 moles of ATP is required for conversion of 1 mole of nitrogen. So microorganisms, they get this energy from different sources. That is, from the oxidation of organic molecule they get energy. And if it is free living microorganisms who are non photosynthetic in nature, they get this energy from different organisms. Maybe the organisms that they consume, or they eat or anything, from such organisms they get this energy. Or if it is a photosynthetic microorganism which can carry out photosynthesis, then such an organism will get this energy for conversion of nitrogen from sugar that they have synthesized in the process of photosynthesis. You know that by the end of photosynthesis you get some molecules of sugar, correct, in the form of energy. They use this energy for the conversion of nitrogen to ammonia in their body. So just summarizing what we studied in the previous few slides, it is telling us that enzyme nitrogenase that is found in some bacteria and blue-green algae, it is able to reduce atmospheric nitrogen to ammonia. That is nothing but nitrogen fixation. Then these bacteria can be of what types? They can be symbiotic, that is they will be in the roots. Some roots, if you have seen, there is white spots on those roots. That is nothing but these bacteria that is living in symbiotic relationship with the legume plants. Okay, or they can be free living as well. And you understood that these bacteria, they need energy to convert N2 to NH3, which they will get from different sources, like they might get it from other organism or in the form of sugar that is got in the process of photosynthesis. So they get energy source from different sources. Next, this step is very important in maintaining the nitrogen cycle. What is the nitrogen cycle? Maintaining the balance of nitrogen in the atmosphere as well as in the soil. So this bacterial reaction, that is bacteria fixing the nitrogen, is one of the most important process in nitrogen cycle. So next we are studying about this nitrogenase enzyme that helps in the conversion of nitrogen to ammonia, which is present in the body of these prokaryotes. There are different types of nitrogenase enzyme, that is different combination of metals will be there in the active site, and most important and abundant one is the molybdenum nitrogenase, where molybdenum metal is there in the enzyme. Main component of the enzyme is molybdenum metal. So we have to study about the structural component and the working of the molybdenum nitrogenase enzyme. The active site of the molybdenum nitrogenase is the FeMO cofactor, that is nothing but iron molybdenum cofactor, which you'll study now next when you're studying about the structure of molybdenum nitrogenase. And this reaction, in what is the reaction occurring in the molybdenum nitrogenase enzyme, that is nitrogen getting converted into ammonia in the presence of 6 electrons and 6 H plus, and of course energy is required. I told you microorganisms, they require 16 molecules of ATP to convert 1 mole of N2 to 2 molecules of ammonia, right? So by the end 16 ATP is converted into 16 ADP. So this is nothing but the reaction that is taking place in molybdenum nitrogenase in the conversion of 1 mole of nitrogen to give 2 moles of ammonia. Next, this is very important question, that is what are the components of molybdenum nitrogenase? Nothing but what is the structural composition? What and all is there in molybdenum nitrogenase and how does this reaction actually occur? Okay, so molybdenum nitrogenase has two components or two structural parts, that is component 1 and component 2. Component 1 is a larger protein component called as the molybdenum iron protein, and there is a smaller component, that is component 2, that is called as just iron protein. Okay. So as you can see here in the diagram, this is the entire molybdenum nitrogenase enzyme. You should be able to draw this diagram. This is the molybdenum nitrogenase enzyme. It has two components, component 1 and component 2. This is the component 2, that is the iron protein, and this is the component 1, that is iron molybdenum protein. Okay, this is this smaller component, that is component 2. Component 2, which is a smaller component, that is the iron protein. Component 1, which is a larger protein component, that is nothing but your iron molybdenum or molybdenum iron protein. Okay, so let us study about each component individually first and what is the function of each component. I will begin with component 2, that is this one, the smaller one, that is iron protein. So this is the structure of this is not actually the structure, it is like an atom, bigger molecule structure. This is just for your representation, we showing it in box form of representation, but you should know at least to draw this diagram if they have asked you to tell about the structure of tell about the components of molybdenum nitrogenase. Okay, so this is component 2, that is iron protein, which is a homodimer, and its molecular weight is around 64,000. Okay, and it has two subunits. Students, remember, it has two subunits. This black spot one, this is the subunit number 1, this is subunit number 2, and these two subunits, they are joined by a bridge, that is the single 4Fe4S cluster, which acts as a bridge between the two subunits. Can you see here like a line, which is that is the 4Fe4S cluster that is joining the two subunits, and each of this subunit consists of one nucleotide binding site. That is, it has a site where ATP or MGATP or MGADP can come and bind. So that is called as a nucleotide binding site. Each of these two subunits have one nucleotide binding sites, and they are joined by a bridging Fe4S4 cluster. Okay, that is the structure in simple words. Next, what is its role in the nitrogenase enzyme? What does it do? It simply transfers one electron to the FeMO protein. Okay, what does it do? It transfers one electron at a time. If the reaction is taking place for a long time, then one it will transfer one at a time. Okay, so it transfers one electron from itself, that is from Fe protein. One electron is being transferred to the component number 1, that is FeMO protein. And along with this, it is also coupled with the hydrolysis of 2 ATP molecule to give 2 ADP molecule. That is, you know that it has nucleotide binding site, 2 ATP come and attach over there, and it gets converted into 2 ADP. So what is the role? One is transfer of electron to FeMO protein, and then it also helps in the hydrolysis of 2 ATP molecule to 2 ADP. Next, how is the functioning of the component 2, that is your Fe protein? How does it function? Now, first step is what? It takes up one electron from ferredoxin or dithionite, that is S2O4 2 minus. Okay, so it is taking one electron, accepting one electron from maybe ferredoxin or dithionite. If it is in vivo, then it will be ferredoxin, or if it is in vitro, then it will be dithionite who will be giving that one electron. So now component 2 is accepting one electron. So what is it set to undergo? It is gaining one electron, so it will be in the reduced form. It is set to undergo reduction. Do you follow this? This is a chart of what is happening throughout in this process. Okay, so ferredoxin, it gave one electron to the Fe protein. So Fe protein has accepted electron, so it is said to be in the reduced form. Correct. So what has happened to ferredoxin? It has itself become oxidized, and it has given that one electron, and Fe protein is now in the reduced form because it has gained electron. Next step is step number 2. While associating, the two Mg ATP molecule bound to Fe protein are hydrolyzed to 2 Mg ADP molecule, and single electron transferred from Fe protein cluster to MO Fe protein. Now, step number 1, what did it do? It accepted one electron from ferredoxin or dithionite. Step number 2, they are telling that one electron that it took, it is giving that one electron to component number 1, that is FeMO protein. Okay. That is, that single electron is transferred from Fe4S4 cluster to component number 1, that is FeMO protein. And simultaneously, the two Mg-ATP molecules that are bound to these two subunits, they are also hydrolyzed to 2 Mg-ADP molecule. That is what is happening in the second step. Now, what has happened? It has, first step it took electron, second step that electron it took, it gave it back to not ferridoxine, it gave that electron to component number 1. So first step it took electron, so it underwent reduction. Second step it gave electron to someone else, so it is said to undergo oxidation. Now do you follow this chart? This is the first step where it has undergone reduction, and in the second step it has given that electron to component number 1, so it is said to undergo oxidation. Okay, and now it is in the oxidized form, that is oxidized Fe protein, and it has 2 Mg-ADP because 8 Mg-ATP has already got hydrolyzed to Mg-ADP. Now it is in the oxidized form and it is bound to 2 Mg-ADP molecule. It is further dissociated by this component number 1, that is FeMO. Okay, and last, by the end of this process we get Fe protein in its original form back, and 2 Mg-ADP is replaced by 2 Mg-ATP. Now these step number 1 and 2 are the important steps that are happening. Okay, I will summarize and tell it again, whole thing. Okay, what is happening? Let us call it as component 2 and component 1 to avoid confusion. Now step begins with component 2. Component 2 takes one electron from ferridoxine or dithionite. So it is taking electron, hence it is said to undergo reduction. Then what does that component 2 do? It gives that one electron that it has taken to component number 1. So it is said to undergo oxidation. And 2 Mg-ATP will be bound to 2 subunits. Those will get hydrolyzed. As soon as it gives those electrons simultaneously, those 2 Mg-ATP will get hydrolyzed to Mg-ADP. Now that electron has come here. Okay, and now this is in the oxidized form because it has suffered loss of electron, correct? Then it wants to come back to its original form, which is done by component number 1, which dissociates component number 2 to give back free Fe protein, and those 2 Mg-ADP which are bound to 2 subunits are now converted to Mg-ATP. Next, that electron has come where? It has come to component number 1. So let us study about the structure of component number 1. So component number 1 is called as the FeMO protein, or you can also call it as MOFE protein. It is a heterotetramer and it contains two main parts, that is a P cluster and a FeMO cofactor. What are the two main parts of a FeMO protein? It is a P cluster. You can see P, 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 P here, correct? Those are the P clusters, and it has FeMO cofactor. This is the FeMO cofactor and this is one more FeMO cofactor. So it has two alpha beta subunits, alpha and beta subunits, like that, two pairs it has, which has a P cluster as well as FeMO cofactor. Next, we are studying individually about FeMO cofactor and about P cluster. These two are the parts of FeMO protein. So we will study individually about them. Now this is the structure of FeMO cofactor. Now here if you see, it is just represented like this, but its actual structure is this one. You don't really have to know this. If you know to draw this diagram, this whole thing, it is more than enough. And this is here for your understanding. I have put this diagram here. It is a detailed structure of FeMO cofactor. So what does it consist? It consists of transition metal sulfur framework. You can see that there is metal, that is molybdenum, and there is sulfur framework. Molybdenum and iron are the metals that are present. And there is a R homocitrate group also that is attached here. So what does this do? What is its function? It is a site of substrate binding and reduction. That is, this is a place the nitrogen binds and undergoes reduction to give ammonia. Here you can see at FeMO cofactor, the nitrogen binds and undergoes reduction to ammonia. So FeMO cofactor is a site of substrate, that is nitrogen binding, and its reduction. That is a function of FeMO cofactor. That is a very important point. Next, what is its structure? A little bit about how FeMO cofactor looks like. So, a 4Fe3s subcluster is connected to 3Fe molybdenum 3s cluster. That is, this part is connected to this part. By what? By an atom X. You can see there's a central purple color atom that is binding this part to the other part. Okay, by an atom X at the corner, and three bridging inorganic sulfides. And R homocitrate is coordinated to molybdenum atom through its 2-hydroxy and 2-carbonyl group. Now this is R homocitrate, which is coordinated to this molybdenum atom through which bond 2-hydroxy and 2-carbonyl groups. And at the center of the FeMO cofactor, there is a light atom X that was detected. This is some light atom whose name is not known, but it is a light atom that is detected in the crystallographic studies. Next, that was the part 1 of FeMO protein. Part number 2 of FeMO protein is what? That is a P cluster. Now, what is the function of P cluster? It is responsible for electron transfer between Fe protein and substrate reduction site of FeMO cofactor. Now, we already studied that there is one electron. Let's go back to the diagram. Where is it? Yeah, we already studied that there is one electron coming from here to component number 1, and you already studied that FeMO cofactor is a substrate reduction site, that is wherein N2 gets reduced to NH3. Now that electron that is coming from component number 2 should reach FeMO cofactor, correct? Only then there will be substrate reduction taking place. That is where P crystal comes into picture. Sorry, P cluster comes into picture. What does it do? It transfers that electron coming from component number 2 to the FeMO cofactor part of the FeMO protein. Okay, so it is like a bridging here in between, takes that electron and transfers it to FeMO cofactor, where once that electron reaches there, there is substrate reduction, that is reduction of N2 to NH3. So let us study. So what is its function? You already studied. So it transfers electron from Fe protein to the substrate reduction site of FeMO cofactor. Okay. So according to X-ray crystal studies, when they understood its structure, P cluster is found to be placed between the Fe protein and FeMO cofactor. That makes sense, correct? Because it has to transfer that electron coming from Fe protein to FeMO cofactor. So it is placed in between Fe protein and FeMO cofactor. Now this is a structure of P cluster here. If you know it, it's good. So its structure involves Fe8S8. That is 8 Fe atoms are present, 8 sulfur atoms are present. They are in two groups. That is in the form of Fe4S4. Two groups connected. Okay. And two groups in the form of cubanes. Okay. And they are connected by what? Two cis S sites. That is, you can see here, cysteine chain. So these two groups, these two cubanes are linked by two cis-S sites, and also there is a disulfide linkage between these two cubanes. Can you see this disulfide linkage that is linking these two cubanes together? So this is the structure of P cluster. So those were all the components of the FeMO protein. Now let us study the whole thing in one stretch. Okay, now we studied it previously part by part. Okay, now whole thing summarized in one step. So one stretch, let us see what is actually happening, students. You studied there are two component number 2, component number 1. Component number 1 is called as a FeMO protein. Component number 2 is called as a Fe protein. Okay, then how does this reduction of N2 to NH3 take place? Component number 2, it begins with component number 2 taking one electron from ferredoxin or dithionite. So component number 2 is accepting electrons, so it is set to undergo reduction. Okay. And then what does the component number 2 do? then it transfers that electron to component number 1. When it transfers that electron to component number 1, here in these two subunits, the ATP is converted to ADP. Then it transfers the electron to component number 1. In component number 1, there is p crystal as well as FeMO cofactor. The pre-crystal, what does it do? It transfers that electron coming from component number 2 to FeMO cofactor. And once that electron reaches here, there is substrate. FeMO cofactor, what does it do? It is a substrate reduction site. There is reduction of N2 that is bound to the FeMO cofactor to NH3. So what is happening? The ferredoxin is giving one electron to Fe protein. Let us understand this chain. It is very simple if you understand. The ferredoxin is giving one electron to Fe protein, that is component number 2. So ferredoxin will undergo oxidation because it is losing electron, correct? But Fe protein is accepting electron from ferredoxin, so it is said to undergo reduction. Then what does Fe protein do? Fe protein gives that electron to FeMO protein, correct? So it is giving that electron to FeMO protein. So it itself is said to undergo oxidation. Now FeMO protein, the P cluster has transferred that electron to FeMO cofactor, correct? So it takes that electron, so it is said to once again undergo, it takes that electron that is coming from component number 2, so it is said to undergo reduction. Then what does FeMO cofactor do? It loses that electron and it is said to undergo oxidation. Okay, so FeMO cofactor is in oxidized form now. Simultaneously, when it loses that electron, nitrogen that is attached to FeMO cofactor undergoes, substrate nitrogen undergoes reduction to give 2 molecules of ammonia. So this is the entire process that is happening here in molybdenum nitrogenase enzyme. Next, we are moving on to the second part of this topic, that is, we are talking about dinitrogen reduction in abiological nitrogen fixation. That is, so far, this is all that happens in our environment by itself, that is, by an enzyme that is there inside the bacteria. Next, here, the scientists, they have attempted to do the same process in labs, that is, in vitro method of nitrogen fixation, so that we can meet the nitrogen demand. Okay, so in vitro nitrogen fixation, how is it done? It is done using dinitrogen complex. Now first important thing that you have to understand, that why is reduction of dinitrogen so difficult? So if I'm there in a lab, why can't I directly take dinitrogen and reduce it to ammonia? Is it a simple step? No, it is definitely not a simple step. So this question arises, why is this that dinitrogen reduction is so difficult? That answer you will understand by the following reasons. That is, you can see that this is a step for the reduction of dinitrogen to ammonia. Okay, so this step involves 6, you have to supply 6 H plus and 6 electron to get ammonia from dinitrogen. Now when I write it, it can be written as a single equation, correct? But practically when you are doing it, it will not occur in single step. Directly I cannot take dinitrogen and reduce it to ammonia by giving 6H plus and 6 electron. It is practically not possible. It has to go through several intermediate steps, like 3 or 4 intermediate steps will be there. Then finally I will get NH3 or ammonia from dinitrogen if I am doing it in lab. So those intermediate steps involve the formation of N2H2 and N2H4. Now you can see here, I want to combine N2 and H2 to give ammonia, but this is not possible directly. I have to go through certain intermediate formation, that is certain steps which involve the formation of intermediates like N2H2 and N2H4. Now for this reaction, that is, this is the intermediate steps that we have written. You can see that E naught value, that is reduction potential value, is very highly negative, minus 1.0 and minus 0.7. So E naught value is highly negative, and any biological reductant that I have in lab cannot carry out the reduction because E naught value is very high. Second thing is the enthalpy of formation of these intermediates is thermodynamically unfavorable. That is, see how much energy, this graph you see, so much energy needs to be supplied in order to form N2H2, and then again very high amount of energy is required for the formation of N2H4. So thermodynamically it is very unfavorable. It is not possible to give so much energy in order to form. Enthalpy of formation is very very high. That is, for the formation of N2H2, almost 210 kilojoule per mole of energy is required, and for the formation of N2H4, 105 kilojoule per mole energy is required, which is very high. Okay, so but for formation of ammonia, very less energy is required, but you cannot directly come here from this step. You have to cross these steps and then reach here. So enthalpy of formation, one reason is enthalpy of formation of the intermediates is very high. Second reason is their reduction potential value also is very high. So any normal biological reductant cannot do this step very easily. And since formation of these intermediates are so difficult, these intermediates are unstable. That is the reason why I cannot reduce dinitrogen directly to give ammonia, because it is one thing, it is not a single step process. It has to occur by different intermediate steps, and the intermediates that are formed, they have high E naught value and high energy is required for their formation, which is not easy to provide. Hence, these intermediates are not stable. If you don't provide so much energy, they won't be stable, correct? So there is formation of unstable intermediate. Hence, the reduction of N2 to ammonia is practically very difficult to do in lab. But they have found a solution how to do this. That is, you're converting dinitrogen or N2 to dinitrogen complex, and then you're carrying out the reduction to give ammonia. That is, dinitrogen is taken in the form of dinitrogen complex, then the dinitrogen part is reduced to ammonia. What happens in this case is that the intermediates that are same way, this reaction, the dinitrogen complex giving ammonia also proceeds through several intermediate steps. But these intermediates, they are stabilized by complexation because it is a dinitrogen complex. It is not just single dinitrogen. It is a complex with some transition metal, and the intermediates that are formed, they are stabilized due to complexation that we will study. So I said that we need dinitrogen complex in order to reduce nitrogen to give ammonia, correct? Whom does this dinitrogen or nitrogen form complex with? It forms complex with transition metals. Now you have heard of carbonyl group, CO group, C triple bond O group, forming back bonding with the metal, transition metal. Same way, dinitrogen can also do back bonding with a transition metal, and they can form a complex with any transition metal. So let us understand what is the similarity between a carbonyl group and dinitrogen. This is for you to understand how it forms a complex. That's all. Okay. So you know that in carbonyl group, what are the reasons it forms back bonding with metal? One is it that it has a lone pair of electron, lone pair orbital. Okay, lone pair of electron orbital on carbon atom. So it can form sigma bond with the metal atom. Same way, in case of nitrogen also, you know that nitrogen has lone pair electron on the nitrogen atom, hence it can also form back bonding with the metal. Second reason is carbonyl group has an empty pi star orbital in it, because of which it can show back bonding. That is, it can accept the electrons from the metal, transition metal, in that empty pi star orbital that is vacant, right? So whenever the metal donates electron, it can occupy those electrons in that pi star orbital. Same way here also in dinitrogen there is empty pi star orbital that is present, although it is of slightly lower energy than compared to that of the carbonyl group. Still back bonding is possible. That is the reason why dinitrogen, like carbonyl group, dinitrogen can also show back bonding with metal, and hence it can form metal complexes. Okay, and because it is of slightly lower energy, the bond that is formed by dinitrogen with metal is not as efficient, or it is not as strong as that of the one formed with carbonyls, but it can still form dinitrogen complex. So now we understood that dinitrogen, it is able to form bond with transition metal. What is the reason also we understood, because of back bonding. So now we are studying about different dinitrogen complexes. Okay, one is with ruthenium. The first example that they found out in the very first when they were working on this, the first molecule that was synthesized also was ruthenium complex. Here you can see that there is dinitrogen attached to this ruthenium transition metal, correct? After that, this dinitrogen undergoes several steps and intermediate steps, and then this dinitrogen is reduced to ammonia later on. So this is the first example of transition metal dinitrogen complex, and these are different example with molybdenum or cobalt. So if you know one of this, you need to know the structure of any one, then it is very good. Next we are studying about one more, that is one more complex, example number 2. This is with titanium. Okay, now, in another method here, titanium alkoxide complex were formed when reacting with dinitrogen with titanium. Okay. Now here they are making dinitrogen react with titanium complex. So dinitrogen titanium complex is formed. Can you see here? So this is a complex. Now from this you want to get ammonia, correct? So on subsequent reaction, that is on subsequent reduction, you can see that you will get hydrazine and the titanium complex back, or you can also get ammonia and titanium complex back. So there is intermediate formation here, you can see, but this intermediate is very stable. What is the reason, student? Because of complexation. Because there is complexation here, this is a complex formation reaction. Because of complexation, the intermediate is stabilized. That is why we are using dinitrogen complex. So, for example, for your examination, you need to know at least one dinitrogen complex and how the reduction takes place. So, this is one example that you can study, that is titanium complex, and how the reaction proceeds by formation of stable intermediates, you can see, and then finally giving you ammonia, and the metal complex as such gets eliminated. Okay, so metal complex will be there first. Dinitrogen will come and form back bonding and form a complex with that, and then dinitrogen will get reduced in the complex form only, and this intermediates are stabilized because of complexation. Finally you get ammonia and the metal complex is obtained back. Now, in simple words, if we have to study how this reaction is taking place, this is for your understanding how this reaction is taking place in dinitrogen complex with the metal. So, the dinitrogen is bound to the metal ion, and the dinitrogen reduction takes place in the following mechanism. This is your dinitrogen. This is your metal ion, maybe titanium, cobalt, or anything. In this case, it was titanium. This part is there, that is a complex part. Just look at the metal ion and dinitrogen. So here M stands for the transition metal ion that is bound. Now if you add one H plus here, there is bond breaking between these two nitrogen. Triple bond is there, one bond breaks, and this nitrogen forms a bond with this hydrogen. Next, continue adding, because you have to add 6 hydrogens here. This reaction involves the addition of 6 hydrogen. First hydrogen is added, add the second hydrogen. Once again, as you keep on adding hydrogen, this bond between this nitrogen and this nitrogen keeps breaking. Okay, so on addition of second nitrogen, this second bond breaks and you get NH2. Then add the third nitrogen, you get NH3, and this bond is there now. So this nitrogen is electron deficient because it has 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. Okay. So it is getting a partial positive charge on itself, this nitrogen. So what happens? This nitrogen breaks off from this molecule and this bond shifts between this metal and this nitrogen. So what you get? You get one first molecule of ammonia here. Got. Then you got M triple bond N. Now, how does you need two molecules of ammonia by the end of this reaction, correct? So once again, this whole step takes place again. You add one more H plus ion. What happens? NH bond is formed, one bond breaks here. As one bond, extra bond is forming with this nitrogen, one bond between this metal and nitrogen keeps breaking. So one bond is broken here, two more you're adding, these two more bonds will break off and this will go out as NH3. And what else do you get? By the end of the reaction, you will get the transition metal as such. So this is how the mechanism is taking place. This is important. You need to know how is the mechanism processing. That is how this entire reaction takes place. The mechanism of this reaction is this one, how it is occurring. So with this part, we have completely covered about nitrogen fixation. I hope you have understood this topic thoroughly. So with this, I will end this video. Keep practicing, keep studying. All the best, students. Take care. Bye.